Hello and welcome to Minukuu tutorials. In today's tutorial, I'm going to share with you how to fix error in read.table, duplicate row.names are not allowed. Now, this error occurs when trying to name the rows of your dataset using a particular column. However, the column that you are using to name the rows of your dataset contains either duplicates or missing values, which I describe as NAs. This error could also occur by default when R tries to use the first column of your dataset to name the rows of your dataset due to the fact that your data has one fewer column names than the total number of columns. At the moment, please take it easy with me. It might seem very confusing, but we'll look at it practically, okay? And then I will show you how to solve this particular error, so please don't worry. Alright, now I have this hypothetical data set here, as you can see. So let's assume this the list of patients which attended a particular hospital unit. Okay, so we have the name of the patient, the date of the visit, first, second, third, in that order, the months of visit, the status, whether the patient has been discharged or hospitalized. Now you would realize that the first column, which is name, for instance, has repetitions. So these repetitions are considered as what duplicates by R. So for instance, we have Minukuu repeated twice. Okay, when we look at visit, there are repetitions. We have first, we have fourth, we have first, whatever, second repeated. Okay, so it means if we should use row.names is equal to, let's say, name or the first column, or row.names is equal to visit, when trying to read data into R, then we would have an error, which is what duplicate row.names is not allowed, which also makes sense because R doesn't like the fact that we have these duplicates. For instance, let's assume we plot this, we use this particular column to name our rows with all these repetitions. Then what that means is that we will have a row, an individual. Let's assume we name our rows with this particular column and we have two repetitions, Minukuu twice. If we should plot a graph of individuals, let's say in PCA analysis, then on our graph we have Minukuu and Minukuu again. Now common sense would tell us that we would be confusing ourselves, like how would we differentiate the first Minukuu from the second Minukuu? And if these two people are the same, then there's no need repeating them. That's what R is trying to tell us. And if they are different, then we must differentiate them. Maybe we should say Minukuu 1 here instead of just Minukuu. So that's why R gives us the duplicates error. Sometimes too, it might not just necessarily be duplicates or repetitions, it might be missing values. So for example, if I should erase this value and also come and erase this value, or even erase this value, whenever there are two or more missing values, R treats these missing values alike. So it considers these missing values as if they were also what duplicates, and it will also give us error. And now, so this particular first reason affects both read.csv and read.table. If you are using read.csv or read.table and you are specifying that row names is equal to a particular column, however that particular column contains NAs or duplicates, then you should expect an error. The second reason, as I said, has to do with the fact that one, it doesn't even involve you. R is just doing it by default. It's because of the fact that your data set lacks one column name. Okay, it has one fewer column name than the actual number of columns. So let's assume we delete status. Now when we delete status, what that means is that we, in actual sense, we have what, 4 columns, but now we have 3 column names. So when you are using this particular error, only affects what, read.table. It has more to do with read.table and it's because of the fact that we have one fewer column names than the actual number of columns. So when you want to read this particular data set into R using read.table, because in read.table we usually specify that header is equal to true, because by default in read.table header is equal to false. So we have to specify that header is equal to true before R can read the data and use the first row as our headers, as our header. In other words, it will use the first row to name our columns. So when we specify that header is equal to true, meanwhile there is one missing column name, then R finds every means possible to replace that one missing column name. If there are two or more, R would give us a different error. But when there is just one, R decides to compensate the gap by simply sacrificing the first column. So what it will do, that it will use the first column as row names, and then it will shift the name of the first column to the second column, shift that of the second column to the third column, and that of the third column to the fourth column in order to occupy this gap. I would show you practically how this particular problem, so don't worry, and I'll show you the solutions. So let me go back. So I have our complete data set here, and like I said, we will try to read our data set into R using read.csv and then read.table, and we will try to name our data set using what? We will try to name the rows of our data set by specifying that row.names is equal to one of the column. And you realize that when the column contains duplicates or missing values, that is NAs, R would give us an error. So let's do that quickly. Our data set that we have right here, I'll save it in two formats as I explained: a CSV format and a tab format. CSV for read.csv, tab format for read.table. So we click on File, click on Save As, and we put it on the desktop as a CSV file. So let me save this as a CSV file, and I'll name it, for instance, error. Let's name it data underscore CSV1. CSV1 here stands for reason 1. So we say underscore CSV1. Then let me save it as a CSV file. Perfect. Okay, and I'll save it again as a tab file. So, or maybe in order to not waste time, maybe you could practice at your own disposal. Like I said, this particular error affects both CSV and and read.table. So at your own disposal, you could try it so that we would not waste my time repeating for read.csv and repeating for read.table. But bear in mind that this error affects both read.csv and read.table. So I've saved my data set as a CSV file on the desktop, and now to read it into R, I would simply say read. So let's say, for instance, data1. We name our data set data. Let's say data reason 1, right? So we say data 1, for instance, or let's say data underscore CSV1 is equal to, let's say, read.csv into brackets, into quotations. Then we go to the desktop and copy the full file extension of our CSV file. So we have our CSV file here. Right click on it and click on properties, click on security, and copy the full file extension, and come to my R and come and paste it here. Now after pasting it, it's important that I change either I put double backslashes or single forward slashes this way. So let me change this one too, and also change this one too. Perfect. Now let's try reading this data set into R and see what happens. R will read it without any problem, because here by default, when you read data set into R names the rows by numbers. So it will do the numbering 1, 2, 3. unless you specify that it should use a particular column to name your data set. So if I read this data set, it has no problem. Let's print data1. Data underscore CSV1, right? CSV1. So let's print it and see. And we have our data set read into R without any problem. However, R has done the default numbering naming. So it has named our rows with 1, 2, 3 in that order. Now, if we want to name our rows by a particular column, then we have to be very careful. The column that we want to use to name our rows must not contain duplicates. Secondly, the column should not contain missing values. So let's go with the first case. So in the first case scenario, the column should not contain what? Duplicates. So let's assume we want to use names or the name of the individuals to name the rows instead of 1, 2, 3. The default numbering. We want to replace the default numbering that R does by actually sacrificing a particular column to name our rows. Then what would happen is that we have to make sure that there are no duplicates. However, if we are to use name as this particular variable, if we are to use it to name our rows, R would give us this error that duplicate row.names are not allowed. Why? Because we have Minukuu here, we also have Minukuu here, so there is a repetition, so there are duplicates. So let's see what happens. However, if we should also use, let's say, visit, we have first visit, we have first visit again, it also gives us an error. Status, we have discharge repeated, so it also gives us an error. However, if we should use month, then we will not have an error because we have January, February up to November without any repetition. So without much ado, let's try to demonstrate the first error. So now, after reading our data set into R, let's intentionally, for instance, we probably wish to name our data set by choosing name as our row names. So we want the names of the individuals to be used as the row names instead of 1, 2, 3. So we simply come and write comma here and hit enter and say row.names is equal to, let's say, column 1. So you can just write 1, which stands for name, this particular column here, name. If you don't want to write 1, then you can also say names in quotations. So you write name in quotations. Similarly, if you want to use, for instance, visit as your column name, then you have to write visit in quotations, or you say column 2, just write 2. So let me run this and let's see what happens. R will give us our famous error. So we have error in read.table, duplicate row.names are not allowed. And as I explained, it's because of the fact that we have Minukuu repeated. As you can see, we have Minukuu here, and we also have Minukuu here. So if we are specifying that R should use this particular column to name our data set, then R will definitely give us an error because there are repetitions. In the second scenario, what are we going to do? We would also, instead of this, we would introduce NAs. And I'm trying to introduce NAs to let you understand that when you have NAs or missing values, 2 or more missing values, R treats them as duplicates in read.csv. Let me show you that quickly. So what we're going to do is that we will simply this particular data set, I will intentionally create some NAs. So let's, for instance, delete in a particular row, right? We could do it in any row. This time around, let's create some NAs, for instance, in let's say visit. Okay, so let's delete, for instance, this value here, and also delete haphazardly any 2 or more values is okay, just to create some NAs. And we will realize that I will treat these NAs as duplicates. So let me intentionally save this one again as a CSV file. so as a CSV file. So let me save this as a CSV file. CSV, where is CSV, please? Commas delimited. Okay, then I'll name this one to 1 2, for instance. It's just to differentiate. So I'll put it on the desktop. Okay, and we try reading this second file into R. So let me copy it. 1 2 is here. Wait, this is the file that has what? Missing values in visit. Sorry, we right click on it, click on properties, click on security, then you copy the full file path. Now let's come to R and I'll show you what happens. So we say data underscore, let's say CSV 1 2, for instance, is equal to read.csv into brackets, into quotations, then we copy the file path that we just copied. So let me put it here, and then I'll put my forward slashes, forward slash, and forward slash, and after which I would also indicate that let's intentionally say, for instance, row.names is equal to column number 2, which is what? Visit. But you realize that now we've introduced in this particular column, we've introduced some missing data. So I told you that any 2 or more missing data will be treated as duplicates because they are similar. It's a missing value. How do you differentiate between these 2 missing values? They are the same. So R treats them as duplicates, especially if you are using read.csv. So if I should say is equal to column number 2, which is visit, or we could write visit. We either write 2 this way, or we write visit this way, visit. Now let's run this and see what happens. R would also give us the same error, duplicate row names are not allowed, because it has treated the missing values as what? As if they were duplicates or repetitions. Like I said, if you are using read.table, the same error occurs. So, but in order not to waste so much time, I don't see the need repeating the procedure with read.table. If you want to do it with read.table, it's very simple. Save your Excel form file as a tab file. Okay, if you want, let's quickly do it. For instance, so we save our Excel file as tab file straight away. So let me save it as a tab file, for instance. Okay, with before I proceed, with regards to read.table, these errors would usually occur because read.table, if you are using read.table and there are missing data, read.table will give you an error that line 1 has no equal number of blah blah blah. So I don't want that error to occur, and then it will create some kind of confusion. So I'll make sure read.table usually demonstrates this error when you have duplicates and not necessarily NAs. If you have NAs, it will give you a different error. So to prevent this, I'll make sure I complete these missing values, and I'll leave these repetitions. Okay, and I'll save the data set as a tab file so that I can demonstrate this error using read.table. So let's save it and write data tab 1, for instance, tab 1. Forget about the name, I'm just doing anything, and I'll save it as a tab file so that I can actually use read.table to demonstrate the error. So let me save it on a desktop as a tab delimited file. Okay, so perfect. Now let's go to the desktop. and we have our tab 1 file here. Let me right click on it, click on properties, click on security, and I'll copy the full file extension just to demonstrate this error to in read.table. So now if I want to read this into R using read.table, then I have to say what? Sorry, let's say I have to say read.data underscore tab. For instance, let's say tab is equal to, if you could say, yeah, read dot table into brackets into quotations, then we copy the full file path. Perfect. Now in read.table, it's important that you specify the header. So you have to say header is equal to true for R to use the first row as a header or as our column titles. So now after doing this, let's read our data set into R. R will not give us any error. You know. So see that the data is well imported. If I should print this, just select the name of the object that you have used to name your data and then run. We have our data set here, right? So we have our data set perfectly. But in a case where, so you see that by default, R has actually numbered our rows using numbers. It has actually named our rows using numbers. So it has numbered our rows. But let's assume, as we did for read.csv, now we want to specify that R should use a particular column to also name our rows. However, this column contains duplicates, then we will have a problem. So let's, for instance, say, let's say we say row.names is equal to, let's say, name. Remember, name contains two duplicates. Minukuu is repeated twice. So say name, which is our first column. R will give us this error. Just to tell you that this error is produced in both read.table and read.csv. So whenever there are repetitions in the column that you want to use to name your data set, you have this error. Duplicate row.names are not allowed. Let's assume we change it to another column with repetition, such as, let's say, visit. So we have first, we have repetitions here or duplicates. So if you say visit, for instance, it gives us the same error, you know. I said visit, right? But what is it telling me? It's saying data error in data attempt to select less than one element. Whatever, this is even a different error altogether. Okay, let's try with another thing like status. Status also has repetitions, and see what happens. So status, if you don't want to write these things, you can just simply write the column number. So status is column number 4. So we just write 4. See what happens. It has repeated the same thing. Duplicate row.names are not allowed because status, as you can see, we have hospitalized. There are a lot of repetitions. Discharge. So these repetitions are considered as duplicates. So we have the same error. So let's assume we select a particular column that has no duplicates. Then R will not give us this error. Let's say month. We have January to February to, I don't know whether it's November, without any repetition. So you make sure you put it in quotations, or you write 3. Month is 3. This is the third column. So we do this, you realize that so since this one has no repetitions, R will successfully name the rows of our column using the months. So in place of 1, 2, 3, we now have January, February in that order. Let's do it quickly. R hasn't given us any error. Let me print it. Select, you simply write, or you could say print into bracket data underscore tab. It's the same. You see what I just explained. So R has used the column months to name our data set successfully. But whenever we select a particular column that has duplicates, then that's where it gives us the error. For instance, if I should say one column number 1, which is name, then it will give us an error. Name has Minukuu repeated twice. Minukuu here, Minukuu here. So we have the error. So in short, this is the solution for the first problem. The solution is that differentiate the duplicates, or use row.names is equal to null. Now, what do we mean by differentiating the duplicates? Since we know that in your Excel file, you know that Minukuu is here and Minukuu is here, that is what is accounting for the problem, right? So why not simply write, for instance, if these two people, like they are two individuals, by mistake or by chance they have the same names, so you could just differentiate their names. Since you want to use this column to name your row names, so you could differentiate. If I should write, let's say, Minukuu 1 and Minukuu 2, these are not duplicates, and R should not give me any error. That's what I mean by differentiating the duplicates. In case where you have NAs, then to solve the problem of NAs, you simply fill, assuming you had missing values in the column that you want to name your data set, the rows of your data set, and R is giving you this error because of the missing values, then you simply make sure you fill in the missing values, or you delete the rows with the missing values. So either if you just have to do something to fill it up, or you could just write something that is not really meaningful, but just to make sure you fill in. But you make sure you fill in differently. So you write something here different, something here different, or you simply just make sure you fill in, or you delete the rows that have missing values in case you want to use a column with missing values to name your data set. If the column has repetitions, make sure you differentiate these repetitions. Okay. An alternative solution is to say row.names is equal to null, but that wouldn't make sense, because when you say row.names is equal to null, you are telling R, you are forcing R to use the default, you are just telling R to use the default numbering or the default row naming. So if I should say row.names is equal to null, so right now I'm not specifying that R should use any of my columns to name my rows. So I'm just saying row.names is equal to null, and in that case R would number my rows. So if I should print this one, and which doesn't make sense, because that's not what we intended doing. We actually wanted to name our rows using a particular column. So we must make sure that that column has no duplicates. If it has duplicates, differentiate the duplicates. If the column has missing values, make sure the missing values are replaced, or you delete the rows with the missing values, so as to prevent the duplicate row.names are not allowed error. So the first problem is solved, okay, or the first reason is tackled. I hope it's well tackled, and we have looked at the solutions. Now let's move on to the second reason, which has to do with the default row naming, by virtue of the fact that your data has an equal number of column names and number of columns. In other words, your data has one nameless column. Better still, your data has one fewer column names than the actual number of columns. So let's assume this particular data set will delete status. Okay, if I should delete status, now our data set has what? One column name removed. It must be one column name. If it's more than two column names, R will give us a different error, especially if you are using read.table. Now, with this second error has more to do with read.table. Why? Because in read.table, we usually specify that header is equal to true before R can actually use the header at the first row as the titles of our columns. We must specify. And I explained that when you specify that header is equal to true, meanwhile there is one column with a missing value or a column title, R sacrifices the first column of your data set as row names, and it shifts the name of this first column to the second to the third, and the third to the fourth, in that order, so as to complete this gap and read your data successfully. So if you don't want this, then you should have to make sure that when you're reading data into R using read.table, because of the fact that you specify that header is equal to true, make sure that your first row is not lacking a single column title, or else R would do it this way. Now R would simply do the shifting. It will sacrifice the first column as row names and do it successfully, provided the first column has no NAs, or especially provided the first column has no what? Duplicates. Okay, so in our first scenario we will do it without duplicates. So as you can see, I have differentiated Minukuu and then Minukuu here. However, we have deleted the column is the data is lacking one column name. So let's save this file as what? A tab file, because this is about read.table. So I'll say read tab. Let me just put BB just to differentiate. So I'll save it as a tab file on a desktop. So okay, so I've created two scenarios. The first scenario, so now let's take the problem again. So this problem, it has nothing to do with you. This default naming of your rows, by virtue of the fact that your data has one nameless column, and then you are using read.table, so you have to say header is equal to true, and then R does default row naming by using the first column to name your rows. However, the first column has what? NAs. So in the first scenario, I will make sure that or the first column has duplicates. Okay, so in the first scenario, I will make sure that the first column has no duplicates. So that's why instead of leaving Minukuu, as I decided to add one here. So these are two different people. Now let's read this data into R and C for the first scenario. So I'll say data underscore, let's say tab 1, I'm just using anything, is equal to read.table. Then we head on to the desktop and copy the full file extension and come and paste it here. So where's our file? Our file is actually here. So right click on it, click on properties, click on security, then we copy it. So we copy it and come and paste it here. Perfect. After pasting it, let me put forward slashes and forward slash. So let's see what happens. Okay, this is successfully done, and now we must indicate that So we put comma here, hit enter, and say header is equal to true. Because for read.table, you must specify the header is equal to true. Else R will put v1, v2, v3. So using your first row to name your header, or instead of using your first row as your header. Now the R has successfully read the data. If I should print this, if I should say print, or you could just select and execute as I usually do. Print into brackets data underscore tab2. Was it tab1? This one, okay. If I should, sorry, let's print this and see what happens. So watch what R has done. You realize that what did R do? We never specified that row.names is equal to name. We never did that, but look at what R did. R used sacrifice because of this missing column name here. We just single column name that is missing here. R has actually sacrificed. We never instructed it to use this one as a column name, but it did it for us, which is also a mistake because it has now shifted. So it has used Sandom, Minukuu, these names as row names in place of 1, 2, 3. That's what it has done, but we never asked it to do that, as you can see. So it has, instead of default numbering, it hasn't done that. And after doing that, it shifted name here now to visit, first, second, which is not what we want. It has shifted visit to month, January, and has now shifted month to come and occupy the gap that was here. Now, so in a case where your data set, the first column has no duplicates, R will read the data set and make this mistake silently. It will not tell you anything. It will just do is shifting, sacrifice the first row as the first column as row names, and do the shifting of the column titles and import the data set without any problem. But on the other hand, if the first if your first column has duplicates, so let me try that for you. So we make sure that Minukuu, for instance, has duplicates. So we write Minukuu here. So now we have Minukuu, which is a repetition. Let's save the data set once again. As a tab. So now let's put tab 1, for instance. Okay. Let's put it on the desktop once again. Since it's the same code, there's no need repeating. Okay, I'll just copy this one. So this is the second scenario. So I'll just copy it. Sorry, I don't know. It's actually tab. I don't know what the name I gave to the file is what. I'll go to the desktop and see. It's tab 1. Okay, this one, here it is, this particular one. So okay, it's tab 101. So let me come to it. I don't want to repeat the whole procedure, so I'll simply paste it here. So there's one here actually. I'm just doing something just to create some difference. So now we have to read this particular data set, which is tab 1, tap this way 1. Okay, and now we have repetitions. Bear in mind that this particular new file, we have repetitions. So we've made Minukuu here, which are similar. So let's see what happens. R has given us the error that duplicate row.names are not allowed. Why? Because our data set lacks one column name. R was forced to sacrifice the first column as row names and then shift the names of the rows, the columns. However, it realized that it scanned and realized that the first column has what duplicates, so it cannot successfully use it, sacrifice it as what row names. So it gave us this error. I hope the second problem is also well presented, and now we will also tackle a solution. So the simplest solution that I could ever give you is to what? Is to simply name the nameless column. So if I have my data set like this, and I'm going to use read.table, because I'll specify that header is equal to true, then I have to make sure that I name this particular column. Why should I leave it? Because if I should leave it empty, R will be forced to replace it, and the only way to replace it is to sacrifice the first column as row names and then shift the first column's name to the second to the third, and the third to the fourth to occupy this space. So make sure if you have this error occurring, even if this error doesn't occur, make sure that you simply fill in all your column titles, because if there's one missing column title, even if, imagine the first column had no duplicates, then it means R would make this mistake by shifting without even your notice. So make sure you fill. That's the simplest solution I could ever give you. The alternative solutions include use row.names is equal to null. Now, when you use row.names is equal to null, what happens? So let's quickly do that. So the alternative solution would be use row.names here. So you simply write comma, and then you say row.names is equal to null. Let's see what happens. So when you say row.names is equal to null, R has no problem. It will actually read the data, but it will still not. I don't know why you may want to use this solution. That's called why I call it the unattended solution. So when you say row.names is equal to null, even if there are duplicates, okay, so you see that Minukuu is still repeated. But because you say row.names is equal to null, R has just instead of sacrificing, so since what it has actually done is that it has still made that default mistake by shifting the column names to occupy the gap. So it still shifted row name here to second row, second column, shifted second column to third column, now third column to fourth column to occupy the gap, and it just wrote row names as a column title for your first row or your first column, sorry. So what it did was that when you said row names equal to null, you are instructing R to number your rows instead of using the first column. So since you have asked it to number the rows, then it has numbered the rows. However, it still must occupy this gap. So we decided to shift the column titles, which isn't still what we want. So this is not still a good solution. And an alternative solution that I think is very good would be using read.csv. What read.csv does is that when there is a missing value, it simply reads the data without any hesitation, and it puts X to occupy that particular column title. That's what it does. It will put X to name the particular missing column title, and it will read the data without shifting the column titles. So I think this is a very good solution in case you don't want to name that particular column title, or you have a very large data set that you don't even know where the column title is found. So you might have, I don't know, you might just want to use read.csv. So for instance, this particular problem, let's save it again, and I'll save it as a CSV file, and I'll show you what CSV does. I'll save it on the desktop as a CSV. So I would say data underscore CSV, let's say VV, just to differentiate, and I'll save it as a CSV file. Okay, now let's go to the desktop, and we have our CSV file here. Right click on it, properties, security, copy the full file extension, and let's come and do the demonstration, and you'll see. So alternative solution is to use read.csv. So we say data underscore csv vv or vv. I could put triple v's. I'm just doing anything. I'm kidding here. It's equal to read.csv into brackets, into quotations, then we paste the full file extension, Control V to paste. Sorry, what did I just do? Let me take it again. I think I made a mistake. Let me paste the full file extension that we copied. Okay, perfect. Now we put forward slashes, perfect. Now let me simply select this and read my data into R. Now if I run this, R has executed without any problem. I should say print to brackets data underscore CSVV. Let's see what R will do for us. Look at what CSV does. So CSV doesn't give a damn. A CSV would import the data, and then the missing column, it would put X. So it put X to replace the missing column. However, it will not do any shifting of columns, and it will number the gaps, the rows. So let's see. I think that is cool. I think CSV does the job very well. That's in case you don't want to name your what is it? You don't want to name your rows. You just want the default numbering. But however, there is a missing column name and you don't want to write the column name for whatever reason, then use CSV. That's all I'm trying to say. So if you would want to understand the details about the row.names code, like why the row.names sometimes gives us this kind of problem, like duplicate row.names issue, I would advise, for instance, you say help, just say help. Okay, for more information, say help, or you could just write question mark and write read.table, for instance, read.table. It's the same, whether it's the same thing, even in read.csv, there's no problem. Then you run it, and you run this, and you see what I was explaining to you earlier on. So when you run this, come over here, you come and read about the usage of read. If you use read.csv, you still find the same argument here, which is what? The row.names argument. Where is it? Look at row.names. They are saying that row.names is what? They said a vector of rows. That is a column that you are using to name your rows, for instance. A vector of what? Names, row names, okay? Now, this can be a vector giving the actual row names or a single. This is not important. This is not what. It's just to tell us that we are using a column to name our rows. But watch here. Down here, they are saying what? If there is a header and the first row contains one fewer field than the number of columns. So if you are saying header is equal to true as in read.table, however the first row contains one fewer column names as compared to the actual number of columns, as we did here, we demonstrated here. So we see that the first row here lacks one value, which is one column name is gone. So now we have 4 columns, however we have 3 column names. Now when this happens, what happens? The first column the first column in the input is used as row names. This is what I explained. It will sacrifice row.table because you specify that header is equal to true. It will sacrifice the first column as row names, and then shift the titles of your columns to occupy the gap. Otherwise, if row.names is missing, the rows are numbered. Now, using row.names is equal to null forces the numbering of your rows. So that's why I propose row.names equal to null as an alternative solution. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you learned something today. Please subscribe to Minukuu tutorials and please share the video. If you would like the script that I've just written for this particular tutorial, please comment below. Just write Minukuu, please send me the script, and we'll exchange mails and I'll send you the script.